Why competitive players refuse to use Rayquaza, and I do apologize, I know that it is pronounced Rayquaza officially. I've been saying Rayquaza for the past 20 years, I'm not about to change. By WolfeyVGC. Now, if there's one thing that I like doing about what I do, is that I get to learn a lot of things. And as somebody who is getting back into VGC, was playing some Reg H this morning, thank you everyone in the Discord who is helping me actually, offload team building, so I appreciate the assistance. Rayquaza is one of those, stat-wise, like, it's good. It's got, 150, could be a mixed attacker, especially in older generations. It was a mixed attacker. Speed 95, sure, it's underspeeding that, that 100, right? Especially that Garchomp at 102. So I figured, let's take a little bit of time and learn a thing, right? I like commenting on things, sure, but I also equally like learning things. So I figured, let's have the competitive side of things really explain why Rayquaza is not used, at least to the extent that one would assume it would be used. So, without further ado.
Rayquaza is one of the most popular Pokemon ever, for good reason. It's a legendary Pokemon, which already elevates its status, but it's also the cover mascot of Emerald, which is not only one of my personal favorite Pokemon games, but also pretty widely agreed upon as one of the best Pokemon games in the entire franchise. Yeah. Rayquaza completes one of the most iconic legendary trios, and its design individually is amazing. I mean, just look.
I can't not see Groudon because I named my Groudon for, excuse me, Reg I. I named my Groudon Lizard. It's a low tier meme, but it checks out. I'm sorry. I'm still laughing because it's such a low effort meme.
Look at this thing. How can you think it's not cool? Rayquaza is also very strong. Very strong. The Pokemon franchise has repeatedly shown that Rayquaza is operating on a world-altering level of power. When Kyogre and Groudon nearly end the world as we know it, it's Rayquaza who canonically restores order, sending the two ancient legendaries scurrying like kids who have made a mess before mom gets home from work. When extraterrestrial threats loom, it's Rayquaza who steps up to bat to protect the planet, whether by fighting off eldritch space horrors or literally destroying a meteor. And at its peak, it channels humanity's literal hope for salvation, igniting the awesome power of Mega Evolution within its own body to become Mega Rayquaza. And when I won the World Championships, I did it with Mega Rayquaza on my team. So I feel qualified to tell you that Rayquaza lives up to the hype.
Dude, we want to talk about, like, well, what authority do you have to speak on this, right? Like, obviously, when you talk about things like, and I've discussed this in the past with certain subjects that, I don't feel, qualified in discussing, right? Look at any of my fat electrician reactions, right? I don't feel qualified to talk about nearly anything in that because I don't have the experience, right? So, he literally won a world championship using Mega Rayquaza, right? Like factually this happened, right? Like can actually cite this. So if we want to talk about and that's not to say end all be all, this is the only opinion, this is the only information, right? But that's kind of like how information, even outside of Pokemon, whether it's something related to your job, whether it's something related to a project you're working on, whether it's, trying to get information from your friend and or social circle, right? Like, cool, this person has... They got it. Like, this is their thing. This is what they know. And I love hearing from these kinds of people, but it isn't necessarily the end all be all, right? Like, getting multiple perspectives, and even watching, there was a video that came out recently, I think it was just before Worlds, about, was it Cybertron Zang? I don't remember. But he was using a friend guard Clefairy Eviolite Rayquaza team, right? Because it doing a Swords Dance just kind of hit everything in that specific meta. So, and even this goes to say, because I'm really passionate about this, and this is why I actually really love knowing teachers for friends, is hearing people not only with authority to explain a thing, but also with passion to explain the thing, right? Because I mean, we could argue that Wolflick is definitely passionate about what he does, right? Like hearing them explain the thing and then comparing and contrasting it to what everyone else says.
Or I should say, it used to. Because while Rayquaza is one of the strongest Pokemon ever, it's fallen off harder than nearly any other Pokemon. To the point where, in the current official competitive format, despite being tournament legal, Rayquaza is seeing zero usage. But back in 2016, Rayquaza was undeniably one of the best and one of the only restricted Pokemon. A restricted Pokemon is a type of legendary Pokemon that is normally banned, only to be released every 3 years or so for players to have a look at. They're called restricted because you're only allowed a limited number of them on your team. Their usage is restricted.
Was it Heart Gold? No, it was Platinum, right? Was it Platinum? Early VGC. Didn't they allow like 4 restricteds? That's a format.
Back in 2016, the number that you were allowed to have on your team was 2. But the thing is, back in 2016, there weren't really that many restricted Pokemon that were actually worth using.
Right.
But despite this, Rayquaza was clearly one of the top 4.
So he's absolutely correct, because there's been a number of times where I've looked at, like, especially in like Auraz era, right? Where it's like, okay, what about Ho-Oh and Lugia, right? Well, they do things, you know, Lugia is going to be the Great Wall, as its name, you know, as its nickname is, right? Very specially defensive. Ho-Oh is going to be very defensive, right? Like, they kind of complement each other. But, like, then you consider, like, what does that do for your actual game state? Singles, sure, you have to deal with things like Stealth Rock. You don't really deal with that in VGC, right? However, you do have to make sure that you're accounting for things like Rock Slide, which Primal Groudon can use. Stone Edge, Primal Groudon also can use that, right? Glandorous T, right? A lot of Intimidate as well if you're, you know, being a Ho-Oh physical attacker, right? Like, it comes down to, and this is, I think, kind of the problem with the Big Six, is it's not that the Big Six was necessarily, like, the best team, because even in, like, his video covering the Big Six, right? Like, there was some interplay there, but it was an easier barrier for entry is how I'm going to word that. Like, it was just the optimal choices. And then you started flexing, you know, what came into Big Six, right? A little bit, right? You had some flex slots, right? Like Talonflame. But, like, they were kind of the optimal slots to hit the most amount of things, right? Like, in any other game, right? Whether it's, you know, well, you just pick this rifle because it's the RPM on it, you know, magazine capacity is great. Something like Destiny, you know, this perk combination, you know, bait and switch, not explosive light. What's the other one? I think it is Explosive Light I have on my Apex. But, like, point being, right? Like, what are we using for Oryx? Darcy, Whisper of the Worm with Field Prep, Bait and Switch Cataclysmic, right? Like, there's just optimal things to it. Yeah, you can run a 6-man T-Crash. No one's saying you can't. But, like, especially if you're using, like, LFG, there's just better options. So, how this comes back to Pokemon, like I was saying, like, there's just, when you're compared to, like, literally Xerneas, the Primals, right? Like, sure, you can use something like Giratina. I tried to use Giratina Origin because I love Giratina. But you run into the issue of, does something fulfill Giratina's role better? If you're looking for something tanky, could you build max HP investment Groudon with Assault Vest if Primal isn't there, right? Or like how can you build it? If you're going for a sweeper, what do you do better than Geomancy Xerneas, right? Or Mega Rayquaza. So that's where metas develop. A meta game is, at its core, it develops because there are certain things that will just achieve the end goal better, right? No one's saying you can't play Exodia and Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, sure, there's the, like, Fusion, like, OTK variant now, right? But, like, you know, sure, another thing saying you can't run Royal Magical Library or No Hope for Escape Exodia, right? But you also could just play whatever the current meta deck is, because it is going to solitaire through its deck so hard and get to the end game of getting its end board set up, having Omni Negate set up, and even potentially, depending on the format and what's banned or not banned, just FTK your opponent, right? Like, there are certain trends that develop just to win the game better. You're not necessarily concerned with your opponent, you know, pulling a Yu-Gi-Oh! And top decking the last piece of Exodia if you just FTK him with Firewall Dragon, depending on the meta again, right? Like, I have so many commentaries on this, and this is one of the things, like, I'm super passionate to talk about, but we're also, like, 9 minutes into 2 minutes of time. So I'm trying to rein it in a little bit.
Beside the likes of Xerneas and, of course, Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre. Now, those of you familiar with the power of Xerneas may be surprised to hear that Rayquaza was able to keep up, given that there was the single most broken fairy type ever made dominating the field. But it's true, Rayquaza was still able to succeed and win the World Championships that year. But it was only able to do so because of the power of Mega Rayquaza. If you've ever dabbled in any type of competitive Pokemon, you've likely heard people talk about the power of Mega Rayquaza. See, Mega Rayquaza has Well, a couple things going for it. First is an incredibly broken signature ability called Delta Stream.
It is so dumb, it's not even funny.
This ability not only cancels out any other weather conditions on the field, and it can't be overwritten by regular weather conditions like sun, rain, hail, or sand, but it also turns off all of the weaknesses of all flying type Pokemon currently on the field. In other words, while regular Rayquaza is weak to rock and quadruple weak to ice, Mega Rayquaza takes neutral damage from rock and only double damage from ice. It also means that Mega Rayquaza has a resistance to electric where it was neutral before. This alone would probably be enough to justify using Mega Rayquaza.
Oh, absolutely. So he brings up a good point. So if we go to something like Koraidon, right? Something that I use in currently, right? Because I actually really have found I really like Sun and Tailwind teams. Weird. I don't know. That was a weird discovery this week. Turns Sunlight harsh when the Pokemon enters a battle, so it already sets weather. Ancient Pulse thumbing through the Pokemon also boosts its attack stat in Harsh Sunlight. I don't know what the exact boost is offhand. I would have to... I'm gonna have to look that up in the other monitor really quick. But that's the thing is like, so how does this... Weather is kind of an interesting thing, as well as the terrains, but the Tapus aren't in the game, so I'm gonna try to like stray away from the Tapus because they have their own kind of like power thing going on, right? But when you run into weather, right? Because you can manually set things like it's not hail anymore, it's snow, sand, sunny day, rain dance for sun and rain respectively, right? Like you can set it, right? It's 33%, so it's a third. So that's actually disgusting for a Calcum Pulse. But so how this it comes down to like, and if you've played like D&D or Pathfinder or like RPGs, like action economy, condensing slots, right? Like if you can spend like in Pathfinder, right? Because I'm currently running with my buddy, right? Where in Pathfinder there's a like shield advance where like for 2 action points, right? Like so in a turn you get like 3 actions, right? So for 2 of those, you can like raise your shield, advance X number of squares, and if you land next to an opponent, you can swing, right? Where normally you would have to spend an action to move, whatever your thing is. I think I'm a funny dwarf, so I move like 30 feet, right? And then I'd have to spend, an action to raise my shield, and then I would have to spend another action to attack. So when we talk about condensing action economy, you're doing effectively 3 actions in 2 and following the constraints of how that ability is worded, right? Like, it's great. And these are things you start to look at. And how this applies to Pokemon is you could spend 1 turn setting your sun, right? Let's just use Groudon, right? You could spend a turn, so your Pokemon goes out, you spend turn 1 setting the weather, and then next turn you will attack, right? You have a tempo of 2. Meanwhile, something like Groudon or Torkoal, right, comes on in and they automatically set the weather, right? You're not having to spend an action, you're not having to spend a move, a turn, manually setting weather. Now, absolutely, there is interplay, especially when you get warring weather. Say, like my opponent sends in a Kyogre, the Kyogre for some reason underspeeds me, so my Drought will go off first, and then the Kyogre will go off, right? And then maybe something like I have Prankster Whimsicott with Sunny Day just for that, just for that point, right? Like, sure, there's some interplay there, but we're getting a little more into the weeds there. When you start looking at things like the Uber weathers, not only do you set a weather, you also block lesser weathers, the basic weathers, from playing with them, right? But you're also completely, in the case of Groudon Kyogre specifically, you're blanking out the opposite typing, right? So if you use a fire move in Primordial Sea, it fizzles out. If you use a water move in Desolate Land, it fizzles out. And you don't even have to come play competitive Pokemon, right? Even if you just play Pokemon at a casual level, right? Let's say a gym leader flinches you, right? And they flinch you for maybe 1 or 2 turns. How far behind does that set you? And that's the thing, is that there's multiple things that go into abilities like this that really make them viable just by themselves, right? If you gave Torkoal Desolate Land and Pelipper Primordial Sea tomorrow, I guarantee you they would see play, even if the primals were still like a thing. I don't know. Maybe the primals are still a thing, but even then, see, you say that because the primals are still a thing, but that also means that you can use a non-restricted Pokemon like Torkoal or Pelipper to get that much value out of just the ability, and as long as you tank with them, wow, then you can run 2 restricted mons like Xerneas. Or, I guess you could maybe throw in the Mega Rayquaza. Point being, right, or like a Miraidon, right? Or a Koraidon, right? Miraidon maybe because it sets electric terrain as well. So, there's a lot of like things that go into something like this, and there's a couple abilities as well. Araquanid back in Gen 7 had Water Bubble. Water Bubble reduces damage taken from fire-type moves by 50%, doubles the power of water-type moves of the ability bearer. It also prevents the Pokemon from being burned. Like, that just does so much. Or like Excalibur, Heat Exchange, right? We've talked about this. If I can actually spell today. Pokemon. Sorry, it's Thermal Exchange. Raise attack when hit by fire-type move, and it cannot be burned. Especially on a heavy, like an actual like physical attacker. Like, this complements it so well, and that already does so much. Being able to just blank out an entire status, because it cannot be paralyzed, cannot be put to sleep, right? The fact that part of the ability says that this just negates X just makes it inherently better. But I think that gets into a little bit more game design territory than I want to, in regards to what makes an ability good, what makes an ability not good, you know, what's a fair exchange. That's a little outside. Point being, when we talk about the primal weathers, when we talk about Delta Stream, Primordial Sea, Desolate Land, those things are just strict value by themselves.
Of course, I haven't talked about the second thing that Mega Rayquaza has, which is the single highest base stat total of any usable Pokemon ever, period. And these stats combo nicely with the third thing that makes Rayquaza ridiculous, which is its move pool. Rayquaza learns basically every move under the sun, and then some more. Want a powerful...
That is definitely an old Pokemonism, right? Like why Tauros learns Thunder and Blizzard, and Meowth learns like Thunderbolt, right? Like, that's Gen 1 specifically, but like, we didn't really have as many signature moves as we do nowadays. And I feel like Pokemon's a little more cognizant of giving certain things to certain other things, but the move pool was just limited back then. So yeah, you had things learning just everything under the sun if they were good enough, if it was warranted that they did.
Offensive move of virtually any type, try Rayquaza. And because Mega Rayquaza has so many stat points, it works as both a physical and a special attacker at the same time. Because even if you didn't train one of its attacking stats very much, the starting value was so high that it could still do tons of damage. Rayquaza also got a signature move in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire called Dragon Ascent, which is effectively a flying type version of the fighting type attack Close Combat. While this doesn't sound very flashy,
Close Combat versus Superpower is actually a really interesting interaction, because when you use Close Combat, that is let me just look it up. So Close Combat, I don't remember what the base power is. I think it's 120 100, right? It is currently, yes, 120 100. Close Combat deals damage but lowers the user's defense and special defense by 1 stage each after attacking. Obviously, can it be lowered to minimum of -6? And if we look at Superpower, Superpower is also a move that is 120 100. It's a physical fighting move as well, but it deals damage and lowers the user's attack and defense by 1 stage after attacking. Now, if you're primarily a special attacker, sure, you don't really care about this, but you have to consider, why do people use Close Combat over Superpower? And you can kind of intuit it as well. If you are, like, say, a Swords Dance up or even a Belly Drum, and you're just on a roll, like you're just absolutely just like smashing through, you don't really care about the defense drop. Or you can have Pokemon like Amogus, right? Yes, I'm saying it that way on purpose because I'm a memester. Like Amogus, or you have Butterfree, right? We had Gmax Butterfree in Sword and Shield. Follow Me and Indeedee, right? Smeargle, right? As long as you can like take target off of it, you don't really care if something hits it, right? I mean, you care if it gets hit, right? But like, you can augment that. If you're going through with a base 120 and it lowers your attack as well, you are sure getting one big hit off, but now you have to either swap out, which, I mean, like, moves like U-turn and flip turn are meta for a reason, right? Being able to swap out, swapping out momentum, etc., right? Like, there's things that go into this. Or you do something like a Swords Dance, right? So you use, let's say you use 2 superpowers, right? You're already -2. Then you'll have to spend a turn maybe using a Swords Dance to get back up to par, right? Or, you maybe put yourself in a disadvantageous situation by swapping out. When you could have just used Close Combat to just keep punching because you don't affect the stat that is currently being used to scale Superpower's damage, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into that. So specifically, if it was something like, if Dragon Ascent was like flying Superpower, I think it would have been, more balanced, but I think that people wouldn't have nearly used it as much. The fact that it is a flying type close combat is disgusting.
You have to remember that flying is an incredible offensive type that is really held back by its lack of good attacking moves. There's like Brave Bird, which has recoil damage, and like that's kind of it. They made dual wing beat, but it can miss. There's like acrobatics, but you need to have no item. There's really not many good options. So getting access to Dragon Ascent, which is a super powerful move and also doesn't deal any recoil damage, is a pretty big deal. Though what really made Dragon Ascent ridiculous is the fourth and, in my opinion, the most crucial aspect of what made Mega Rayquaza so unbelievably good. Hold on a second, Wolf. We can't tell them Rayquaza's big secret yet. We need to tell them about this video's sponsor, Raycon. This fall, lots of folks are heading back to school fresh from their summer vacation. I am not heading back to school because I am 29 years old and I have videos about cartoon animals to make.
Dude, I feel that though, right? Like, literally, unironically having a conversation this week about, well, you know, Kip, maybe you should just go back to school and take some classes. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm literally, sure. I get stressed out sometimes. Sure, I overthink a lot of things, but I mean, like, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm gonna scale this up as high as I can go. Like, I have plans in the work. Maybe a podcast, maybe not. I can neither confirm nor deny that information at this time. But like, yeah, no, I feel that. I totally feel that. I'm just John Public Figure.
However, I also want to feel fresh. Oh. What's this? Wait, my green screen. No. Wait, hang on. I can do this.
Amazing.
Oh, what's this? Very nice. I got the mint colored ones because I like mint. These are Raycon's essential open earbuds, and they allow me to listen to music while keeping my ears open. Now that's what I call fresh. These are super lightweight and they never feel bulky despite their unique shape. So they're great for gaming, going to the gym, or just walking around your house, cleaning the kitchen, which, I mean, let's be honest, you gotta clean the kitchen, dog. Like you're overdue, and we both know it. This year I've done a good job getting back into running. I've run at the time of recording this over 90 miles in 2025, so good job me. And I've been wearing my Raycon earbuds every time I run. Personally, I like how secure these open air earbuds feel, and I will definitely be using them going forward. Their 36-hour total battery life is also huge for people like me who are absolutely going to forget to charge them, which allows me to run with some peace of mind. If you think some Raycons would make you feel fresh and you want to support the channel, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/wolfeyopen to get 20% off across the whole site. That's buyraycon.com/wolfeyopen for 20% off across the whole site. Okay, but now we have to get back to what Rayquaza's other big secret is. Wolf from the past, please tell me, please.
I would give it objective 8, subjective 9. Knowing how Wolfey kind of paces these videos, how he's done reads in the past and stuff. Yeah, like, I mean, I'd give that a 9. I think if we're looking at, you know, someone coming across this, you know, pretty flat, flat expectations, I think it'd be an 8. I mean, I liked the read. I thought it was short and sweet to the point. The green screen bit was funny. I like that he was able to weave that in. Right. I love ad reads with a lot of personality, whether it's, you know, someone like M&J TV with Grunty Boy, whether it's someone like Shoe on Head who makes a whole bit out of it. And you didn't skip the ad, did you? Right. Fat Electrician making some memes about butter churning that go over my head. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I like the personability that's added to it, but there's definitely an amount where it would be too much. I'd have to find an example. I can't think of it offhand. I thought this was a good balance. I thought it was a good ad read. It told me what I needed to. It presented the information, visual cues, used the product himself, right? Like, audio was consistent with the rest of the video. Like, yeah, like, it was a good ad read. I liked it.
Normally, in order to Mega Evolve one of your Pokemon, you had to hold a special item. Right. Kangaskhan for Kangaskhan.
Yep. He's going to talk about how you don't need an item for Mega Rayquaza, and that is literally the reason he breaks.
Mawile for Mawile, etc. This was the case for every single Mega Pokemon, and it makes sense from a balancing perspective. Yes. Because items allow you to multiply your Pokemon's power, and given how much stronger Mega Evolutions are already than regular Pokemon, giving them an additional boost from an item would just make them too difficult to keep in check. Which begs the question, why would they let Rayquaza, the strongest Mega Evolution, Mega Evolve for free? See, unlike literally every other Mega Evolution in the game, instead of needing to give up its held item to Mega Evolve, Rayquaza simply had to learn the move Dragon Ascent.
Which is really funny. Like, so if it had to learn something like the move Faint, right? Or like, even if Dragon Ascent was, like we're saying, like a flying superpower instead of flying close combat, that would affect the usage. but you are incentivized to use the really strong move, right? You're incentivized to use Dragon Ascent, and Dragon Ascent also enables you to Mega Evolve for free. It's disgusting. Now, if we want to talk about like Sun and Moon, like, you know, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, you cannot do a Z move and a Mega Evolution, as they do take up the same spot on the screen. So if you Mega Evolve Rayquaza, you cannot, like, you can't use a Z move at the same time as well. Like, you would argue that's a balancing point, but I think it's how Pokemon is by design. Which is why, you know, we've seen the funny, like, Pokemon champions where you get your Dynamax, Terra type, Mega Gyarados with Z flying or something like that. And it's like, it's a meme, but I get, you know, we know that it's not going to happen that way. It's fun to talk about. It's really funny, but that is, being able to have a Pokemon use a specific mechanic is kind of the balancing point, which is why primals as well, just in general, like Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre were problematic as well, because they kind of broke the whole like 1 mega per battle, right? Because as long as they were holding red or blue orb, they just primal reverted for free. So once again, talking about economy, yes, you had to, you know, you couldn't use something like a Choice Band, you couldn't use something like Choice Specs or Choice Scarf, right? Or Life Orb, right? But you're still primal reverting. Oh, excuse me, allergies. But like, yeah, it is disgusting. It is disgusting how much value is condensed.
You know, the super broken move that you were planning on using anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Mega Rayquaza was so broken that in the unofficial singles formats, they had to make an entirely new format just to handle it, because this thing was too uber for ubers. When people talk about the most broken Pokemon of all time, this thing almost always gets a mention. After 2016, Mega Rayquaza was no longer legal for the following 2 years, but it maintained its reputation as one of the strongest Mega Evolutions and one of the strongest Pokemon period going into the 2019 competitive season, which is the next time it was legal. During that season, it won the North American International Championships, used again by yours truly. And then it went on to...
I'm going to be honest, I keep seeing Lunala pop up. I guess Lunala won 2025 Worlds. I had never considered Lunala, and it kind of throws me off that people use it. Not in a bad way. I'm just like, I clearly missed the value Lunala has.
Earned 2 top 8 Worlds placements. And that's not another first place trophy, but it is a testament to one simple fact. Mega Rayquaza was one of the most fearsome Pokemon to ever exist.
Fact. Also remember, how heavy was Sun and Moon format? All of the Tapus had second typing of Fairy, right? This was a Dragon type, which is weak to Fairy. It's Dragon type move, so if you had Dragon Claw or Outrage or whatever on it, cannot affect Fairy typing. So you're probably using its, like, you know, either coverage moves or you're using specifically Flying, don't get me wrong, but like, that is not nothing. That is not a nothing burger.
Because after its 2019 performance, Rayquaza vanished, disappeared back into the sky from whence it came. Rayquaza, one of the strongest Pokemon ever, has not had a tournament win in 6 years and counting. Now, to be fair, Rayquaza hasn't been tournament legal for every format since 2019. But also to be fair, every single time it has been allowed, which is 2022, 2024, and 2025, Rayquaza has sat at under a single percentage of usage and at the bottom of every tier list. And
I know what I must do, chat, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Clearly, I just need to become John Rayquaza. Just show up to every event, and people are running, primals whenever they're legal again in Champions, right? People are running Paradox, Ultra Beasts, Koraidon, Miraidon, Xerneas, and I'm just sitting here like, no. You see, we're running Rayquaza. We can make this happen. I'm not the best team builder, and I'd have to get a lot more VGC experience. But I could do this. I would take this as my claim to fame.
Sometimes a worse Pokemon will still have its diehard fans. There's no trainer out there going to bat for Rayquaza.
You fool, this will be me.
Not even me, one of its single biggest fans. Yeah. Since 2019, there are only 7 recorded uses of Rayquaza in official tournaments in the past 6 years. And out of those 7 teams, all but 1 placed outside the top 128. The only one that made it inside top 128 placed 115th. So just barely squeaking in there. So the question is, why? How did the Emperor of the Air get sent crashing to Earth? Well, the initial answer seems obvious. What made Rayquaza so unbelievably broken was its Mega form, a form
Yeah, I mean, the actual stat buffs in Mega Form alone are actually insane.
That was removed from the game following 2019.
Right.
This is seen pretty clearly by looking back at the 2019 season. See, even though I've been talking about 2019 as if it was only one format, it was actually three: Sun Series, Moon Series, and eventually the format that we played for the World Championships, Ultra Series.
Right.
What's interesting about these three rule sets is that, unlike most other formats which rotate Pokemon in and out, these three formats kept the same list of legal Pokemon, but changed which mechanics were legal. In Sun Series, neither Z moves or Mega Evolution was allowed. Moon Series added Z moves, and finally Ultra Series added Mega Evolution and whatever's going on with Primal Groudon and Kyogre.
So that is actually what we're thinking Champions is going to do. We're actually thinking that they're going to drip feed it that way. You know, day one, we don't just see like Big Six everywhere on ladder, right? Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to use Mega Evolutions or Z moves or XYZ ABC, right? That's under the assumption that we just have access to it right off the bat, and we're not going to have to do, you know, like Legends Z to A, buy additional DLC, play on ranked ladder, achieve certain placings to be able to get Megastones that aren't available in the base game, right? I'm excited, but also very cautiously optimistic for Champions. Let's put it that way. I want to see what happens when it actually, like, when we get more information about it. But like, this is reasonably what we're expecting. We are expecting to kind of be drip fed mechanics, and it's also pretty fair and reasonable, right? Like, can you imagine, like, if you just picked up Pokemon, even if you just pick up a game in general, right? And then you go on ladder and everyone is just using like meta strats. Like, I don't know enough about like the Street Fighter or Tekken communities, right? But like, if you like, and that's the thing, is like they have a very high skill floor and high skill ceiling player base, right? Most fighting games do, from Smash Bros to you know, Tekken, Street Fighter, Soul Calibur, right? Like, regardless of what you're playing, right, you're gonna hop on, you know, ladder, you're gonna hop on ranked, and you're gonna get absolutely just blown out of the water by whoever just shows up first, right? As someone who played Naruto Storm back in the day, I mean, even then, that community has a really big, really big skill floor, right? Where you'll get just absolutely juggled and wombo comboed, and I think it makes it a little bit more fair and approachable for some people. And I know it kind of flies in the face of like, well, you're just limiting and restricting what you can use for competitive, but I also kind of justify it from like, you know, headcanon Pokemon League says this is legal, well, that's not legal, this is like they're kind of making the rules for a specific format, right? Like, even if you go the whole anime route where it's like, you know, Ash goes to Indigo Plateau in Indigo League, right? And then, you know, going to Johto, and then, you know, Johto's going to come back around. And then, you know, you'll have like Johto Pokemon in the mix of the next Pokemon League, right? You know, insert different area, different Pokemon. It's kind of like a mini version of new games, right? Like, you're just updating the format. Or even comparing it to like, you know, imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh had a format. I think Master Duel does have a format where it's like you can only use Fusion Summons, Fusion Summon Festival. You cannot use Link Summons, or you cannot use Synchro Summons, right? Like, they're able to make the game more modular and approachable, and even draw interest because they're changing up formats like that. And I also think that it also makes a more well-rounded player to be able to play in different formats, to be able to go, well, you know, I really like Sun teams. I really like, you know, the duo of Groudon and Koraidon. They're not legal in this format. What am I going to use? Well, I mean, I could use something like Alolan Ninetales, Cantonian Ninetales to be able to set Sun. I could do that if I wanted to run more Trick Room oriented, you know, something along the, you know, my Sunsetter might be Torkoal, right? Like, sure, you're translating things over to a degree, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one, because you transfer to Torkoal, you don't necessarily have the offensive staying power of Groudon, right? I'm getting into the weeds here. Point being, I think that formats are actually a beneficial thing and can lead to players who actively play in them being more well-rounded and getting more experience.
In other words, we can compare regular Rayquaza to Mega Rayquaza by seeing how well it performed in the Sun and Moon series compared to Ultra. So, how did regular Rayquaza do? Not good, and by that I mean it really wasn't used at all. Even with other Mega Evolutions banned, Rayquaza still couldn't keep up. So, I guess that's it, right? Case closed? Mega Evolution is the only thing that was making Rayquaza good? Well, not exactly. No. Because remember, Rayquaza doesn't use a stone to Mega Evolve. So the Pokemon Company couldn't just ban Rayquazaite from play. Right. Instead, they had to ban Dragon Ascent, Rayquaza's single best move. So this isn't actually a fair comparison, because we're not comparing Rayquaza to like Mega Rayquaza, we're comparing Mega Rayquaza to Mini Rayquaza, Rayquaza Jr.? Keep in mind that the #1 winner from the Sun and Moon formats was arguably Xerneas, who only needed to rely on the Power Herb to reach its broken power level. And so this actually isn't such a fair comparison when we want to look at just Rayquaza. The fact remains though that losing its Mega Evolution was a huge blow to Rayquaza. Not only does it lose its broken ability, it also found itself down 100 points in base stats, which is functionally the same nerf that Groudon and Kyogre received. And yet, those two still saw a ton of play. So our mystery hasn't been solved yet. There's another mystery we have to solve first though, which is some of you aren't subscribed, and I would like for you to subscribe. That would be cool. Subscribing helps the channel out a lot and also lets YouTube know that you want to be notified of my videos when they come out. I'm hoping to do more videos like this one, diving into competitive Pokemon's history, so if you're enjoying this one, make sure you subscribe. Anyway, something that
I like it's a non-invasive way of asking. I mean, I'm already subscribed, right? It's a non-invasive way of asking, and at the end of the day, I mean, it is the advice of like, you want people to like and subscribe a video, you consider asking them, right? And if there's a little bit of like disingenuity, you know, if I started the video, hi everybody, today we're reacting to X, make sure you like and subscribe, right? Like that's a little too off the bat, right? A little too like forward, right? And at the end as well, because I can tell you my retention is awful. Just because I yap so much. Like saving it towards the end, you can is more like reasonable, but you can also lose a lot of people along the way. I mean, I liked it. I like how it's just a non-invasive way of asking. And it's a good way to feed into his own metrics and bottom line.
What's strange is that following the removal of Mega Evolution, Pokemon introduced Dynamax and then Terrestrialization as new mechanics. And in theory, Rayquaza should use both of these mechanics quite well. The single best Dynamax move in the game was Max Airstream, which is the move that all flying type moves would turn into. The reason it was so good is basically it did more damage than it should have, and it gave your Pokemon a speed boost, and speed is like super important in competitive play. And Rayquaza seems like it should be an ideal user of, again, the best Dynamax move in Sword and Shield. As a flying type legendary Pokemon with a high powered move to base it off of, it's easy to imagine Rayquaza blasting through foes and running away with the game. But it's here that we get to Rayquaza's weaknesses, and there are unfortunately many of them. While both Dragon Ascent and Extreme Speed are strong moves, they share some types that resist them in Rock and Steel, with Steel also resisting Rayquaza's Dragon type moves. Moreover, these moves can only hit one of your opponent's Pokemon at a time.
And this is actually why V-Create Rayquaza is such a thing on Smogon. Because when you're walled by like, you wouldn't necessarily be walled by Amogus, right? But you'd be like, yeah, walled by like, I don't know, Mega Aggron, Mega Steelix. You'd be walled by, oh god, Zamazenta even, right? Well, yes and no, because that's also fighting. Point being, right? Like if you're getting walled by like Steel, you do at least have the opportunity to crash in with V-Create, but V-Create is not legal for standard play because that was an event, you know, back in ye olde Black and White days that I think only came out in Japan. And even if you transferred it up to Scarlet and Violet, right, like it automatically wipes movesets to make that Pokemon battle ready. So I feel like actually some better coverage would actually really assist Rayquaza.
And while some restricted Pokemon can get away with hitting one foe at a time, Pokemon like Groudon, Kyogre, Xerneas, and both Calyrex forms are strong in part because they can beat down both your foes simultaneously. Regular Rayquaza also doesn't have an unthinkable attack stat, meaning you likely wanted a Swords Dance boost before you started firing off attacks, and in the high-power, double-restricted format of Sword and Shield, it was pretty rare that you were actually able to take it slow. One quirk of Dynamax is that once a Pokemon has gone big mode, their moves lose all of their priority, aside from Max Guard. In other words, your starting speed stat matters a lot when you Dynamax. And surprisingly, Rayquaza isn't actually that fast. It sits at a cool base 95, which isn't terrible, but it's way under the other speedsters of this format. So Rayquaza takes a little while to get going, and in that time, your opponent could be dishing out instant damage with things like Choice Specs Kyogre or just Zacian. Speaking of which,
so this is actually one of those things where, because I am habitually a prankster Tailwind user. Like, I absolutely love Tailwind. It is probably like my favorite move in the game because I do like speed modulation. I do just like being faster. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning a lot about in terms of fighting Trick Room, trying to read certain things, right? Because like I'm lacking. I have a lot of good theoretical knowledge, but not a lot of good like practical understanding, right? So I mean that's just play more games 5-head status. It's one of those things where I mean I've looked at things like Dracovish and I'm just like, what, you have like a 60 was Dracovish 65 speed? Dracovish, because I genuinely remember this in Sword and Shield format, where I'll look at something like Dracovish, and the funny fish has like a 75, right? And it's like, well, if I tailwind this just goes to like a 150 base speed stat, right? Like, and as long as I can get my tailwind up, and I can deny my opponent either Trick Room or Trick Room denying me by using, say, like a Tornadus Taunt. I have wars with Tornadus. Ugh. Or, you know, just prevent them from playing the game. But that's the thing, is like, already that's like, it's literally the Magic the Gathering Slivers argument. If the deck plays itself and I can actually play the game, Chuck Norris best deck in game, right? But it's like, then I show up playing Tron and I'm just like, bro, like, I'm just gonna blow you out like turn 3. But that's the thing, is it relies on a lot of parts. And 95, he is correct, underspeeds a lot of really valid threats. Threats that you could say, why would I run Rayquaza when I could just run Calyrex Shadow Rider to try to check other Calyrex Shadow Riders, or even post-nerf Zacian, right? Because it's like, it still has one of the best offensive typings in the game, and will just try to blow through your opponent's team. Like, there are valid arguments he's bringing to the table.
Rayquaza has an awkward relationship to Dynamax in general. First of all, it wanted to spend a turn outside of Dynamax to set up a Swords Dance ideally. And while Max Airstream is a great move, the issue is that the other move that Rayquaza would normally run is Max Strike, and that's only okay, and it also achieved the same thing but slightly worse by lowering your opponent's speeds rather than boosting your own. The reason Rayquaza needed to use Max Strike is because Extreme Speed is one of its best moves. And in fact, Extreme Speed and Dragon Ascent were the only two damaging moves that I used when I won the World Championships. Of course, you could drop Extreme Speed, but that meant that Rayquaza was way worse outside of Dynamax. Yep. But then again, if you used it, it meant that you were often just down a move slot inside of Dynamax. If we look at the other Max Airstream abusers of the format, like Thundurus and Charizard, they had really useful, really powerful secondary moves that didn't have too much overlap with the Max Airstream itself. And so if you wanted a dedicated Max Airstream user on your team, there were better options that also didn't take up the restricted slot. Now, Rayquaza is also a Dragon type, and so if you wanted, you could drop Swords Dance, or you could drop Extreme Speed and try and get Dragon coverage. But if you wanted access to Max Wormwind, you had to choose between the low-powered Dragon Claw, the incredibly unreliable Outrage, or the specially based Draco Meteor, which,
if I remember correctly, Outrage, it will, how does Outrage work in doubles? If I remember correctly, it's random which one it hits. According to Reddit, double battle Outrage targets a random foe. Triple battle target any adjacent foe. Yeah. So like, but then that's the thing, is like, he's correct on the unreliable part of it. Like, if I'm going to fire, because like, here's the thing, if you have like, say, I don't know, an opposing Rayquaza and like a Tapu Lele, right? And you, if you can click Outrage and you have a coin flip to if you actually do damage or not, the move just isn't consistent. It just isn't. Draco Meteor is the superpower phenomenon where, yes, you're hitting for big damage, but you're lowering the stat that the move scales off of. So therefore, it's going to be diminishing returns.
Attack from the opposite side of the spectrum as Dragon Ascent. I told you earlier that Mega Rayquaza could be used as a mixed attacker, using both special and physical moves. But that's because Mega Rayquaza has 60 more stats in its offenses. If you gave Incineroar 60 more stats that it could use, I think I would have no choice but to retire. Regular Rayquaza just doesn't have the raw stats to justify using a special attack without investing any stat points into it in the same way that its Mega form can. I haven't given it too much attention yet, but the loss of Delta Stream is also a pretty big deal for Rayquaza.
It makes it less defensive.
While its regular ability Cloud9 still does turn off the weather, it now has to deal with way more weaknesses than before, including both Flying and Dragon being weak to Ice. When I used Mega Rayquaza to win tournaments, I was using it in part to handle opposing Kyogre. And at North American Internationals in 2019, I used Assault Vest Rayquaza, which took 3 Ice Beams to KO with Kyogre.
That is disgusting that actually calcs at 3 Ice Beams. Oh, I love that.
Bulk is really important on Dynamax Pokemon because, like, if they go down early, then you don't get your 3 turns of value. But without its Mega Form, Kyogre Ice Beam suddenly become a much scarier prospect, and that's not even talking about Max Hailstorm. But what if I told you that the biggest issue wasn't even its typing or its moves or its ability, that there was another more frustrating issue, one that invalidated Rayquaza almost entirely, and that issue was a single Pokemon. Mega Rayquaza
Xerneas? Who is this?
Rayquaza may have previously been considered the most broken Pokemon ever made, but Generation 8 introduced a new contender, one seemingly handcrafted to cut the dragon down to size. Zacian is Rayquaza's worst nightmare. You thought I was going to talk about Incineroar, I bet, but no.
Yeah, he got me. He baited me. I was about to,
This time it's different. It's Zacian, okay? The thing about Zacian is it's immune to the Odd Dragon move, and it resists both flying and normal type moves. And it can deal super effective damage back with Play Rough. Not to mention, if Rayquaza Dynamaxes, Behemoth Blade now does double damage to it as well. I do think all the other issues with Rayquaza definitely held it back a little bit, but I don't think any of them were as hard to overcome as Zacian.
Which is really funny because Clodsar comes along in Gen 9 and effectively tells Zacian to sit down, especially with Unaware.
Just no way that Rayquaza was going to succeed when Zacian was the second most used Pokemon at the World Championships, only behind Incineroar. So Rayquaza's first foray without Mega Evolution was, well, I mean, it didn't really foray anywhere. It just sat in the no usage zone. It was outmatched, overpowered, and underwhelming. Power creep had caught up, and Rayquaza would need something special to get back on top, which surprisingly is what Generation 9 seemed to offer, with a new mechanic seemingly tailor-made for Rayquaza's problems: terastallization. There are two primary ways that a Pokemon can benefit from terastallization.
So I was actually thinking about this today. It was why I was looking at how why people will use something like, in specifically Groudon's case, like, because I'm using Terra Steel right now, but I also have access to like Heavy Slam, so it does technically give you stab on Heavy Slam, but like people use it as a defensive option, right? Or like running into a Ice Calyrex this morning, right? Where it's like they water Terra. That way, you know, that they'll eat the Flare Blitzes, especially off something like an Incineroar, right? Like, you're using it defensively at that point, but you can also use it offensively. Say, you know, Rayquaza using its Dragon Ascent, right? And if you Terra flying, you're not gaining the defensive benefits, but you're, instead of a 1.5 times stab, you're gaining a 2 times stab. So you are boosting your power by doing that.
The first, and often most important, is defensively. A Pokemon can switch its type on a whim, discarding the weaknesses that may have weighed it down before, or it can simply flip a problematic matchup on its head. The second, of course, is offensively, although there are a couple different ways that you can use Terastallization here. You can Terastallize to get access to a coverage move. With Terra Blast, Pokemon can cover type combos that they normally wouldn't be able to hit. This is a powerful tool, but it also requires using a move slot, and it will often lock the Pokemon into always Terastallizing. The second type of offensive Terastallization, and the more commonly seen, is to power up an existing move, because Pokemon receive a 50% power boost when using a move that matches one of their types. An example of this is Pokemon like Hydreigon, which could launch Terra boosted heat waves once it had turned into a fire type. And the best type of Terastallization is one that combines both offense and defense. Luckily for Rayquaza, it had a perfect role model for just this type of Terastallization: Dragonite. Before Rayquaza even got in the plane to Paldea, Dragonite was terrorizing the metagame with a Terastallization-reliant strategy perfectly attuned to Rayquaza's capabilities. This strategy revolved around a Terra Normal boosted extreme speed, often next to the legendary Pokemon Chien-Pao, who reduces the defense of all Pokemon while it's out on the field. With a Choice Band, a big old gemstone on its head, and the Snow Leopard's menacing aura, Dragonite could rip through anything that didn't resist its normal type moves. In addition, Terastallizing to normal dropped Dragonite's otherwise terrifying weaknesses. As a dragon and flying type, it's weak to ice, rock, fairy, and dragon, all weaknesses it gives up when it turns into a normal type. And as I'm
It's honestly a really big brain play, because then you do get the benefits of both offensive and defense.
sure you know, Dragonite shares a typing with Rayquaza. This Dragonite Chien-Pao combo became one of the most standard building blocks for teams during the first year of Scarlet and Violet, and even beyond in the second year, picking up a good deal of success there too. And it seemed like Dragonite was just laying down the red carpet for Rayquaza. After all, Rayquaza does everything Dragonite does and more, right? Better attacking stats, an actual usable flying type move, and even the option to run Swords Dance and free up your item slot.
What's Dragonite's base stat total? Because it could be that Rayquaza's less bulky. So if we go to Rayquaza, 105, 150, 90, 150, 90, 95, BST 680, BST 600, 91, less bulky there, less offensive, 95, 100, 95. It is technically more bulky with how I understand the defenses interact with HP. Like if you're something like Blissey or Chansey, you could have the highest HP stat in the game, but like it does nothing. But on the other hand, like you know, a single close combat is just going to wreck you, right? But you could also have the other side of things where you're like hyper defensive Shuckle with like insane defenses but very little HP, and you're still going to take damage, but you just don't have like, so you want to find somewhere that's pretty balanced, right? So like if you're really wanting to go hardcore into bulk, yeah, maybe you'll go bulk out on like HP, maybe do some investment into HP, and then like, you know, go harder into the defenses. I don't know. Defensive EV investment is one of those I haven't really mastered yet. That's one of those I've been trying to consider, and it seems like just solely HP is kind of, unless you're already pretty bulky, it seems like the standard play is to invest into defenses over HP. But HP, if you already have good defenses, is a very good investment. I don't know. That's one of those that I'd really have to think on and actually dive into the math on how defenses actually interact with HP.
Honestly, the biggest difference is just that Rayquaza has Airlock, whereas Dragonite has Inner Focus as its ability,
right,
which ended up being a deal breaker because Inner Focus makes Dragonite immune to both Fake Out and Intimidate.
Yep.
Freeing it up to start attacking immediately, even in the face of, you guessed it, Incineroar. Inner Focus also makes the Choice Band way more appealing. You can't have your damage sent back to reasonable levels if you ever get intimidated, and being unable to protect yourself is way less important when you don't have to worry about the positional tool of Fake Out. It doesn't help that the best Intimidate Pokemon and the best Fake Out Pokemon are one and the same, Incineroar again, and Incineroar is on nearly every team at all times, because the problem is that after an Intimidate, Rayquaza is actually noticeably weaker than Dragonite.
So what happens? Like when do they actually just ban the cat? Because Pokemon nerfs things like Gale Wind, Gengar got nerfed to only get Cursed Body. Like what are they actually gonna do to Incineroar? Because we've already had an Intimidate nerf going into what, Gen 8 and Gen 9 both? The cat just keeps going.
Meaning it had to choose between the Clear Amulet item, which makes it Intimidate proof but doesn't offer a damage boost, or the Choice Band, which makes it way stronger when Incineroar isn't around, but a lot worse when it is. Airlock was a disappointment in more ways than one. Lots of competitive Pokemon formats are ruled by weather, and in the past, Groudon and Kyogre were two of the best and most used restricted Pokemon. But in Generation 9, the game is often centered around Pokemon who don't mind clear skies, like Miraidon, Zamazenta, and both the Calyrex forms.
And that's where, this is where Airlock becomes a detriment, because you must be playing into weather. If you're not playing into weather, it is a dead ability. It's like, what is it, Telepathy on Palkia, Dialga, and Giratina, right? Sure, I guess it works if you're trying to avoid an earthquake, but like, why? Why would you? I don't know. I guess pressure's not much better, right? But like, it comes down to your ability could just not work. Which I'm a huge fan that some things just need to get hidden abilities. Like I've called for Flygon to get a hidden ability from at least Gen 6, right? Like, if I remember correctly, Trapinch Vibrava do have a hidden ability, I think. Pokemon DB. Yeah, Sheer Force, hidden ability. You go Vibrava. Okay, cool. Well, no, that just gets Levitate. So it kind of consolidates. But like, sure, Flygon is just worse Garchomp in a lot of ways. Is there an ability, like, I don't know, like Sand Force or something that it could get play into its, you know, ground type antlion aesthetic that could just make it better or just perform better, or at least make it just an option that people can stomach, right? Like, you look at Rayquaza and it's like, yeah, you get Airlock, but like, or it's like the Regigigas effect too, where it's like, yeah, it gets slow start, bro. You know, as long as it's not emergency exit, dude, I'll even take pressure at that point. So I think maybe sure, there's even if you don't give it its mega back, like getting some sort of hidden ability, because it only has Airlock, so therefore it is kind of locked into dealing with weather, like, would help it immensely.
Oh yeah, speaking of, Rayquaza certainly hates to see Ice Rider coming. Not only is it an Ice-type Pokemon with a move that hits both of its foes, but it's also a phenomenally bulky Pokemon, making it nearly impossible for Rayquaza to break. Now you might think that with a little help, say a Swords Dance or Clear Amulet and maybe Chenpao as well, Rayquaza can get around these weaknesses by just blowing up its foes with extreme speed before they can move.
But that's the thing though, right? And like that's so relating to the Pathfinder D&D, that is 3 actions, right? Well, more like 3 things to get it going, versus your opponent just existing and being able to fire off a glacial lance, right? You see how that doesn't quite match up?
Reality is that extreme speed felt way more like just okay speed in practice.
Yeah.
Let's think of a best case scenario. +2 Terra Normal extreme speed with Sword of Ruin active, and you still don't KO Caloric's Ice Rider, who by the way has its Glacial Lance boosted because you have your own Chen Pao out in the field. And it's not like you're close either, like you should only be doing about 75% even with this combo. And again, this is assuming that you managed to get a Swords Dance up in front of Ice Rider in the first place, which is already quite difficult. Caloric's Ice isn't even the only problem. Groudon and Bulky Koraidon can survive this extreme speed as well if they want to. Lunala and Caloric Shadow are fully immune to extreme speed, and there can even be a partner Pokemon like Indeedee, Sarina, or Farigiraf that just completely shuts down all priority moves, including extreme speed. In an absolute best case scenario, sure, Rayquaza's extreme speed could eviscerate the correct slot, just in time to get picked up by the other Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field, exploiting the damage that you've taken in setting up, or faking you out, or intimidating you, or whatever. Rayquaza is simply too linear and too slow to really make work. In the time it takes to set up, the opponent's probably already lined up one of their 3 countermeasures. If you're running Choice Band, you're locked into one strong-ish move at the expense of any sort of flexibility. But what makes things really funny is that Rayquaza's game plan hasn't really changed since its heyday. This method of attack, hard, concentrated, and single target, is exactly what I used it to do back in 2016. All the gimmicks since then, whether max airstream spam or banded extreme speed, play towards that same idea. It just needs a little bit more power, a bit more X factor, something special. Yeah, okay, it needs Mega Evolution. Look, I've done a lot of circling the drain here, pointing out Rayquaza's other flaws. And the point remains that without those flaws, maybe regular ol' Ray could get the job done. But you can't get away from the simple truth. With Mega Evolution, Rayquaza's a contender. He's a somebody. Without it, he's a noodly nobody. The extra power level means that that simple game plan is worth pursuing. Mega Rayquaza can muscle through contingencies and create enough pressure on the field that a single Swords Dance can derail your opponent's whole game plan. Or it can lean into defense, using the Assault Vest in combination with Delta Stream to survive unbelievable hits while attacking with strong physical and special moves. Or it can lean into the burst potential and use Life Orb, not caring about Intimidate thanks to the power buff and its ability to use Draco Meteor. Or maybe another set entirely. There are new items now that didn't exist back when Rayquaza had access to its Mega form. Maybe Clear Amulet Mega Rayquaza is a whole different beast. You never know. Unfortunately, Mega Rayquaza is not in Scarlet and Violet. But for some strange reason, I just have this feeling that it won't be too long until we're seeing Rayquaza at full power again. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you might be interested to hear about how Dragonite kind of followed the opposite arc of Rayquaza, starting out as a Pokemon nobody would touch, and then finally becoming one of the top threats in Scarlet and Violet.
So this was actually incredibly enlightening, and I really love this. So I want to thank WolfeyVGC for putting out such an amazing piece, because I know, like me, a lot of people really love Mega Rayquaza, right? Like, a lot of people really love it. A lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Love the design. A lot of people's favorite game in the series is Pokemon Emerald. But I think it was a really good piece in trying to understand and piece together, like, why such a popular Pokemon doesn't see more play, right? And even then, so I was like, it's even going forward, right? Because we've had Pokemon who get stat nerfs, right? Excuse me, even Zacian alone, right? The only other Pokemon aside from Mega Rayquaza, in both of its form, mind you, Zacian and Zacian Crown, to get an actual like nerf. It got 2 nerfs in Gen 9, base attack reduced from 170 to 150, and also an Intrepid Sword nerf. I had to look on Reddit for that specifically. But it's one of those things where, like, maybe Mega Rayquaza goes from 180 to, like, I don't know, maybe 150 each of these. But does that necessarily solve that? So when we consider Mega Rayquaza at the time, Gen 3, heck yeah. I mean, this thing is a powerhouse. But you consider how power creep and how the game has evolved over the years, and it's like Mega Rayquaza was made with a Mega in mind. Like, it does kind of hit those like Gen 1 Mewtwo heights where, like, this is your end game, because you had to go through the Delta story, the Delta episode at the after the post game, right? Like, that was your end game, like, Pokemon, but it just translates really awkward into competitive. So it makes me wonder, especially when things like Gengar got nerfed to have only Cursed Body and no Levitate anymore. Gale Wings got nerfed. Aegislash got nerfed, right? Makes me wonder if Power Herb in some way, shape, or form might see a nerf because of how it performs with Xerneas' Geomancy, right? Like, if they were going to bring it back, how would they affect this? Would they blank out the item slot? Would they, I don't know. It's interesting to consider, but it's all speculation until we actually see something. And I know that whenever Champions, or even Gen 10, if it has it, right? I'm sure we're not going to be able to see it in, what do you call it? Legends Z to A. You know, maybe we will. I don't know. I don't know what's entirely in that game, and I'm kind of excited to see. But yeah, this has been definitely a wild one to look through, and it does make sense. Like, the points brought to the table are all valid. Yes, one of the big issues is it just doesn't have its Mega Evolution anymore. It still has stats that are really good, don't get me wrong, but, you know, we have things like Garchomp now. We have 100 being kind of like a gold standard because of how speed interacts, right? It does have moves. It also gets unironically gets weather setters despite having, airlock. It gets things, like Outrage, it gets things like Hurricane, but it feels like it simultaneously focuses too hard, like Wolf has said, but it also simultaneously feels like it has that, like, that multi-utility that doesn't really give it a niche. And things will just do what it does, but better, or in the case of Ice Rider Calyrex, just wall it completely. But come to your own conclusion. I thought this was honestly amazing. I really loved watching this. I thought this was actually really cool to watch because, like, it was just so cool. It was so cool to see this, and I love hearing competitive stuff like this broken down. Thank you, Wolf, for another amazing video. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you all in the next one.